Hey, lovely people. Welcome to the Witch's Tea podcast. I'm your co-host, Malorine from Moonlight Divination.
And I'm your co-host, Violet, from Violet the Green Witch on Instagram. On the Witch's Tea, we will discuss topics centered around witchcraft, magical practice, and everything beyond the veil. So, Malorine, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Well, my name is Malorine Mathurin. I am a spiritual practitioner. I've been going back and forth about how to label myself, but I think that runs the gamut of many things. But I'm a psychic medium, an intuitive. I'm an astrologer. I read tarot. I read actually a cartomancer, to be honest. And I have over 30 years experience in the field. So I've been doing this kind of before school, about 5 or 6 years old. The psychic and mediumship stuff comes first to me. And astrology was more when I was in my preteens, probably around 9 or 10. Violet and I are a bit older, and I definitely was part of the library crew after school, and I would read everything I can find on astrology and the occult. And this is before Google, before the internet.
Actual libraries and books.
Actual books, sitting with a librarian that had to get you a reference book that was twice the size of you.
And you had to use a card catalog to look for your book.
I miss card catalogs.
You could never find the book you wanted.
No, because it was always out. It was always some rando person who had the book for 5 years. It was like, Bob from whatever, can you please return this this Edgar Casey book, please? I need it. And it's we couldn't contact Bob because he was living in a warehouse somewhere. I don't know. But it was, we have fond memories of the libraries back then. But that's really where we got our information, know. So Violet, you want to give us a bit of information about yourself?
Sure. So I am a psychic medium, and I've been a practicing witch for over 30 years. But before I even started a witchcraft practice, I grew up in a house. My family's Cuban, so I grew up in a house with a grandmother that practiced magic regularly and had altars to all the saints, to the Orisha. So that was amazing and mysterious to me, which I absolutely loved. And since I had gifts that already had developed at a very young age that I didn't know what to do with, I was sort of drawn to a lot of things like the Edgar Casey books. And although I grew up Catholic, I had my own spin on it too. I really loved Jesus in the way that I loved, just like I love Hecate or Diana or anything. It was just another amazing magical being, right? So I would read all these children's book Bible things, and then alongside of it I'd be reading Greek mythology, at the age of 12, going to the library, taking out everything I could find on mythology and on psychics and on past lives, because I kind of felt that I was having dreams about past lives, but I wasn't really sure. And then as a teenager, I started meditating on my own, and I really wanted to also start doing readings and stuff for people, practicing it. I didn't know anything about it though, but I bought a tarot card that I still have to this day, which is my favorite, and it's the Aleister Crowley deck, the Thoth deck. Yeah. Exactly. I didn't understand Aleister Crowley and his background, but the woman who made the images was actually not of the same kind of energy. So I'm totally cool with that. But anyway, so when I was 18 and in art school, one of my classmates, when I told him all this stuff about myself and the way I looked, I guess, because I was kind of goth back then, I'm a little bit still, he, said to me, he's like, I think you really should read this book, The Truth About Witchcraft by Scott Cunningham. I ate it up, loved it. And then he showed me a witch store that really was something out of Harry Potter. It was freaking amazing. All the old wooden bookcases with the stairs attached to them.
That would roll.
Yeah, it was on 19th Street. Doesn't exist. Hasn't existed in years.
Was it Enchantments? Enchantments?
No, Enchantments was the other store. It was called Magical Child.
Okay.
It was called Magical Child, and Herman Slater was the owner of it, who was queer and who unfortunately passed away from AIDS. And then his partner tried to run it for years, and then it was like too much, I guess, for him, and he ended up shutting it down. It was the greatest store ever, though, because it really was everything you imagine a witch bookstore would look like. It really looked like something taken out of a movie, but it was naturally like that.
I think it's something that, definitely has been, I think we grew up in the 90s and 80s and like, I grew up with Botanicas, and they weren't, welcoming places.
Yes, not at all.
They were actually what you saw in the movies. They were creepy as hell. You had some weirdo guy in the front. I mean, this guy sounds really sweet, but it's like, but you probably had turned people off because it was just like people were like took one step in and they were like, I'm scared of this place. And it wasn't meant to be scary. I mean, it was just because it held a lot of mysteries, and I kind of missed that. I mean, those kind of witchy stores from the 90s and 80s were like something else.
Enchantments still exists, and Enchantments was like them, but I'll tell you right now though, like they were not nice in these stores. It was like the old school New York where people were assholes to you, like straight up. Like they were just like, we don't want you in here kind of vibe.
We don't need your business.
Like, we don't need your business because we're witches and we're too cool for you.
Yeah.
It was that environment that always sort of like really kept me to being a solitary witch, where I didn't want to reach out to any of the witches that I actually would encounter at these stores, because I was so afraid of these people. Like, and also like, to me, they were like gods, basically. They've been practicing witchcraft for way longer. And on top of it, I had a crush on one of them. She looked like Madeline Stowe. And I was just like, she's so beautiful. And I would literally just like, would get a candle made by her and just be like dying in a corner.
Oh my God.
Too.
That's part of it. I mean, that's like, you think about we watched the movie with The Craft, and it's like that shopkeeper. It's like, she wasn't really mean, but I mean, that's like typical, like pretty much find your own books, do your own things. Don't ask me any questions. Like, that's really what it was. I mean, we didn't have Google. You had to figure it out. And I feel like maybe a lot of witches in that time were solitary witches. So I'm sure covens existed. They did, but I mean, the people that I know, they're all solitary because we have to do our own thing. And
there was no community.
Especially. And there was no community. And as well, because, I mean, being a witch wasn't cool back then. It wasn't cool, but it wasn't like as mainstream.
It wasn't mainstream. It was actually, if you told anybody you're a witch, they looked at you like you had 3 heads and they were scared of you.
I mean, I have like so many stories. Like I remember in junior high school, not the whole school, but a lot of people in my grade didn't talk to me for like most of junior high school because, I mean, they were right. I was a witch, but it was not something especially in the Caribbean American community, like that's not something you talk about. You were called an obia woman or a bruja or something like that. And that was a bad thing. So yeah, I mean, I was like, I didn't want any of that heat. I didn't want any of that smoke again. So I was just like, I'm just going to shut my mouth, not say anything, keep my tarot cards at home, not talk about astrology, even though I loved it. And that's just what we did.
I think it's interesting, though, that we have both come from Caribbean backgrounds, but the experience is very different. Where for me, like my family, my dad always says he never believes in it, but of course he believes in it because he's like, I always tell him, like, how can you be scared of something that you don't believe in? But for my mom on my mom's side of the family, because my grandmother, practiced her own magic, her own form of Santeria, and also just because in our culture, for being a psychic or a medium is actually kind of special and looked up almost, like, or like there's something like that uniqueness is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a gift. And I think most, at least the Cubans I know, think of it as a gift versus, but there are Cubans too that are like uber Catholics that are also think that, you're the devil. So it goes both ways for sure. But like, at least my personal experience, thankfully, was that my family had no issues with it. I think my mom only had issue with it just because she knew how much spirits were attracted to me. And she was just afraid because I was young and didn't know what I was doing, that I would be attracting something that would hurt me, which actually did happen. I was physically hurt by it.
Story time on that one. Yeah. I mean, it was interesting you said too, like your family were just, it was more concerned with your safety.
Yeah.
Like where mine, and I wonder if it is something about the diaspora, because my family's from Trinidad and Haiti. I wonder, like, my family was just, especially in the community, was just like, no, we don't even talk about it. We don't mention it. But we knew there were like witches. I remember there was a witch house on the corner, and we would actually call it the witch house. And we knew that they were practicing like voodoo and stuff. And we would find like paper bags with like chickens, dead chickens with their heads cut off, because we knew they just did a ritual. And they were like, the whole thing was like, you don't touch those bags, because if you touched a bag, whatever entity that they were trying to get rid of was in that bag, and if you touched it, you got like, it was like, you're it. It was like tag. But it was very much, I mean, and it could just be like the negative stereotype around Black communities and practicing maybe what even the Catholic religion is seen as negative witchcraft. And what it was just consolidation of African practices that were carried over from the within the diaspora. So it's interesting, like, that your family were so like, oh yeah, we just want to protect you, where mine was just like, don't even mention it, don't talk about it. I would talk about like spirits coming to me at night, and they just like, you're ridiculous, you're crazy, like eat your oatmeal and like shut up. And I was like, okay. Like I had no one to talk to about it other than like my great grandmother, who was the one who kind of supported. And I did say great grandmother, so she was actually alive when she lived until I was 18. And she had my grandmother young. But she was like a free spirit. She was psychic medium. She would take me to the botanicas. And it was so funny because I was very much like a weirdo kid, devout Catholic. I mean, it's so funny. Like we're like witches for Jesus, like the super Catholic witches. But I feel like a lot of us started that way. And like maybe have past lives being in the church. And I always felt so like, I love being in the church, and but it's just the people.
I hated the church. I mean, I went to Catholic school and everything. I absolutely hated the church. Yeah. I loved Mary and I loved Jesus.
Actually, like what they like Jesus and Mary.
I love Jesus and Mary. And to this day, even though I work with all these other deities and stuff, I still love Jesus and Mary. I think Mary's a loving, wonderful, beautiful being. And I think Jesus is a cool cat. Like I really do.
Yes,
like he's a total hippie. I love him. I think he's a cool dude.
Make a shirt like Jesus was a cool cat, and let's have him with like the glasses, like cool cat.
Exactly. I mean, like every story I've read about him was nothing of anything except the compassion. And I think it took actually me going to college, to a liberal college where it was art school, and taking religion as an elective, like in religion history.
Yeah.
And where we were talking about Christianity from an outsider point of view versus within, Catholicism, right?
Makes a difference.
Exactly. And you're talking about specifically Jesus's teachings. It was very different than like being in Catholicism, where they're like beating every week into you, like
sometimes
some sort of yeah, exactly, sinful behaviors and all that sort of stuff, which that filtered into so much of my life too. And then especially later on, coming out as queer and stuff, that all kind of made me turn away from the church at a very young age. I mean, I actually came home to my parents, I think it was like 12 or something. I was like in the 6th or 7th grade. I can't remember. I told my parents, because my parents stopped going to church with us. So my parents, come from a good port, like communist Cuba, where churches were closed and the clergy were literally rounded up, either killed or sent back to Rome. And so they didn't have a practice of Catholicism regularly there. So for them to go to church regularly was not a thing. So we, as students in a Catholic school, they made us go. And so I actually told my parents one day when they refused to go, and I was like, if you don't go, I don't go. And I was like 12. My mother was like, fine. That was it. And that I feel like that was sort of like almost like divine intervention, where like I was able to like start my own path of discovery for what my belief system was going to be. And I always gravitated to the magical. I mean, I had such a relationship already with like nature spirits and animal spirit guides since I was very young. And same as you, psychic medium, seeing spirits all the time when I was a kid. So it was only natural to gravitate towards it. I think what we were just talking though before about the, like my family wanting to protect me versus not, don't talk about that with anybody. I think what you were talking about makes sense. And where I am lucky and I come from a place of privilege because we present as white, even though we're Latinos, that we didn't have that demonizing of, like of the African slaves that were brought to Cuba. So, maybe somebody who's Afro-Cuban might have a very different experience than I did. You know what I'm saying? I also grew up here in the United States and not in Cuba, because in Cuba, like literally everyone at this point had to be practicing Santeria because there is no church. There is no religion allowed. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. Established religion is not allowed in Cuba. Absolutely not allowed.
That's something I didn't know, actually.
Yeah. Like they literally, when Castro took over, he rounded up all the nuns and all the priests. They were put into a concentration camp. Some of them were killed. And the ones that didn't make the boat, because Rome sent a boat to pick up all the clergy.
Wow.
And they picked up all the clergy and brought them back to Rome. And so a lot of Cuban clergy ended up, living in Italy for the rest of their lives. So I think that all those factors kind of helped my parents not judge me or tell me that there's something wrong with what I'm doing. Because I think that's the other part of it too, is because they had so much taken away from them that they never wanted to take anything away from me.
That's really interesting. I never really thought about it in that way. And I didn't know the history of, I just thought I guess in my mind, I just kind of grouped the Caribbean. Every Caribbean country has its own culture and own history. Haiti's very different from Trinidad, different experience. So yeah, I guess in my mind, I just kind of somewhat consolidated them all in my head, and we've all had a similar experience. But I didn't, obviously, because Cuba was the only one of Caribbean nations who had communism coming in,
right?
Where other ones didn't,
right?
Pretty much
we had dictatorships.
Completely different experience. I didn't ever really thought about that, and I feel like in terms of with Haiti, the fact that half my father's from Haiti, and I didn't grow up with my father's side of the family until later on, but it was very much embedded in the community because it was Caribbean, so we're a mixture of Jamaican and Guyanese and Trinidadians, and so Haiti was always the demonized community in especially in Black Caribbean community, where Haitians were seen as all sorts of names. Growing up, I can't even want to repeat them, but it was always we never wanted to say you were Haitian. You would always say, if you were mixed with something else, you were the other island, and it wasn't cool. It wasn't but now it's a totally different thing. But of course, because Haiti is also connected to voodoo, which is also seen as a negative, especially in the Black community. So, and even that witch house I was talking about, they were Haitian. So they were always the kids. Nobody ever played with the kids. It was a very isolating experience. And even my older brothers, who I have half brothers, and long story, but then end up meeting them when I was an adult. And they grew up in Harlem, and I remember them saying that they didn't admit to their friends that they were Haitian, and they're full Haitian. I'm half, so their mother and our father are Haitian. And they would say they would hang out with the African American friends, and they would lose their accents and not speak Creole at all. And but now they do, but they had to almost. I think my oldest brother, he said he had to almost relearn it because he didn't speak it for 5 years.
Oh my God.
Because he didn't want his friends hearing him speak Creole, Haitian Creole. And as we know, the Haitian Revolution is very much steeped in. I was reading something where the slaves in the revolution said that the spirits told them, which I'm sure they did. They told them they were led by spirit, which began the demonization of African spirituality and within Haiti. It was seen, and then the whole zombie thing came out of that, and just a constant denigration of what the practice actually is, and it's been pretty much demonized. So yeah, whole history behind that, and you think about it. Practices like that were being done in every other Caribbean island, but just Haiti. Poor Haiti just takes the brunt of all of this. they're always seen as like quote unquote the bad guys, but because they kicked ass, they were the first, Caribbean island to get their independence, and they're still paying for it. I mean, the fact that they have to still pay back France is ridiculous, which is why they're still one of the poorest islands.
They're still paying back France.
They're still paying them back.
That's insane.
Yeah, which is why they're so poor. And the Dominican
the
Republic,
French should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, all of them should be. I mean, it's ridiculous how colonialism is still running rampant in our society, and that's what Dominican Republic wants to separate themselves from Haiti so much. This is like why the Dominicans never consider themselves to be Black, even though like they're darker than me. It's like, we're like literally there's like a line that divides us, right? There's like nothing else. Same lineage, same family. You speak more Spanish, we speak Creole. Anyway, it's a whole thing with that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how we got on this topic, but talking about like
we're just talking about like our backgrounds in general, and like how acceptance within our families, and like how cultural history has informed either the like having to hide being a witch or being okay being a witch. I also gave zero fucks. Excuse my language.
I give all the fucks.
But literally, I walked around with a leather jacket that I bought at a vintage store, and I painted a giant pentagram on the back of it.
Holy crap. And
I wrote something about like the goddess or something on it too. And like I would walk around. I think my best friend, who's Colombian, she was like very non-judgmental and didn't make any comments or anything. But she just had to help always rein me in, because I would get comments, especially like really nasty comments, but from people out in the street when I was wearing it. And of course, my reaction was a very New York reaction. And I would tell them to go F themselves or whatever the case. And she's just like, just ignore them. Just ignore them. Or, like I would like turn around and of course threaten them with a spell, even though I would never do that. FY, I would never do that, unless it was to protect myself. And at the time, actually, I was Wiccan. I identified as Wiccan. So I never actually, would harm somebody. Like I would never intentionally, but I always, I always used it as a form of weird protection, especially because like it was always men, of course. Like, I was like this tiny little like goth fairy girl, right? And I attracted a lot of attention, and I wanted obviously attention because I was wearing a giant ass pentagram on my back and I was dressed goth head to toe. Of course, I was going to attract attention, and but the attention was always not the kind of attention any woman or young woman wants. It was really inappropriate, and so my response was always, to threaten them with witchcraft.
I love that. And this is pretty much, witches down the line. This is what they did, right? For that protection. I'm interested to hear about your move from being a Wiccan to, like, I think a lot of people put them all in the same category.
Yeah.
And we could talk about being initiated compared to, like, say, myself, who's not initiated. So let's hear from you, Violet.
So I, like I said, I was introduced to witchcraft through Scott Cunningham's book, Who Was Wiccan? So that's kind of like the road I went down. I didn't know that there was other kinds of witchcraft really at the time. And anyway, Wicca kind of really, I really connected with it. And I still have a lot of practices that are Wiccan in their essence, I guess. But they're also witch practices. They're not necessarily specific to Wiccans. But, the idea of being very nature-based and very loving and, goddess-based, although Wicca is technically goddess and God-based, where it's kind of like the thing I've moved away from to, which I felt like I never, like working with a god never really resonated with me. I occasionally do, but like where I have them up on my altar or something like that, no, I always have goddesses on my altars because those are the ones that resonate with me. And that was part of me moving away from Wicca. But how I got into it was really because of the books that I was reading. I was reading, Scott Cunningham, Marion Weinstein, which is amazing. She's a New York comedian. So her books to read were awesome. Silver Ravenwolf. So my education really was that from a Wiccan point of view. And I literally spent, like, I didn't have a coven, so I couldn't be officially initiated into a coven. So I did my own initiation, and I actually did, like, so Scott Cunningham did a book on solitary witchcraft, and I actually practice what is normally done, which is a full year and a day of study. And you're just studying the craft. You're not doing any spells. You can do rituals, like, you can follow the wheel of the year, and do the rituals for the holidays, to celebrate those holidays, to, sort of align yourself with the practices of full moon and new moon, and, so all the Esbats and the Sabbats, and all that stuff within the year. But I didn't practice any spells. Although when I was younger, I was doing, and I didn't realize until I was older, doing, like, folk magic that was associated specifically with Cuba, like stuff that I learned in my own house, like turning St. Francis upside down in a closet to find something, and stuff like that, or putting a glass of water upside down with somebody's name inside the refrigerator to stop them from hurting you. I did that kind of stuff. I didn't realize that was like witchcraft. I just thought those are things that we just did in our family. But like I said, I did the studies, I read the books, I learned everything about herbs. I was very attracted to plants and animals since I was very small. My grandmother had a massive garden. She worked a lot with herbs. So I started working with herbs at a very young age too. And I waited. And I think my first spell was a protection spell, which I always encourage everybody that's starting with witchcraft to, that's really the first spells you need to be starting with, because there's nothing more important than protecting yourself, protecting your magic, protecting your power, protecting your home, your family. All of that is so important to learn to do the protection first over everything else. You are working with spirits. You're working with other people, or even just like a regular person around you that might have really some strong will and energy that can cast shitty thoughts towards you that, like, will manifest in a bad way. So all these protection magics are really the key to starting witchcraft, is for if you're going to start doing spells. And that's what I did. And then, like, little by little, I did. Right after that, I actually did, I think, my first money spell, my prosperity spell, because I needed money for school. Yeah. I wasn't going to get funding, and I needed to find money, and I got a scholarship after I did the spell. It was a small scholarship, but it helped, Yeah. And I got other things, like I got little jobs and stuff like that. So that helped. But that was like how I really started my practice. I had no one to talk to about this. Like I said, I was too shy to like talk to anybody, even in the stores. They all scared me. So I just read. I read like every book all the time. I'd be in a car ride to like Florida because we would drive for all our vacations, and I would literally be reading all the way wherever we were going. If we were going upstate, I'd be in the book in the back reading a book about witchcraft. Thankfully, nobody gave me any problems. I built my first altar. I literally just found some scraps of wood, because I've always like put things together. I have that very MacGyver Cuban thing about me. Like, since my family didn't have a lot, like we sort of just like figured things out to make things out of something else. So there was some purple paint left over from my bedroom, because my bedroom was purple, of course.
So that's very interesting, but I just want to let people know that we're actually talking, like, we had to MacGyver our yeah, so we had to, like, pretty much what he would do is like use a stick of chewing gum to like create, I don't know, fix a car or something like that. Exactly. So pretty much like we're trying to record this first episode, and I forgot the clamp for our mic, and like literally like the microphone is like in a garbage can held by a water bottle and a vinegar bottle. So like,
and a bracelet.
So like, yeah, Violet pretty much like MacGyvered like this. And I'm just going to want to add that in because, yeah, problem solving is definitely on point. So sorry to
And just for those of you who are too young to know who MacGyver is, Google him. It is a show that literally this guy would be able to, like, I don't know, create a rocket ship out of a hair clip and some duct tape. So that's kind of where the expression comes from,
Yeah.
to MacGyver something, to basically problem solve something physically that you might need to then figure out in your environment what you have to create the solution. Anyway, so
sorry, purple.
No,
purple paint.
Oh yeah, so purple paint. So I made this like wonky 3-tiered altar that looked like sort of like a bookshelf, but wasn't. It was really wonky too. And I painted it purple, and I had like my levels. Like my first top was like where my actual altar was with the god. It had Aphrodite, I think, and Demeter on it, and candles and stuff. Second layer was like my first group of herbs and bottles, because it kept growing from there and growing. Now it's like literally half my kitchen. And then like all my magical tools that I had, you know, and I would have to like save up too for everything.
Yeah.
I still have my athame, and my athame was like over $100. That was a lot of money for me. That was so much money for me.
It's a lot of money now.
It's a lot of money now, absolutely. But it was like it was like the equivalent of like $2,000 or $5,000 to a person now to me back then.
Yeah,
I had to save for a long time. And I saved for a crystal ball too. I would save up like the little money that I would make and that I didn't have to spend on art supplies. I would set aside for my like witchy things.
Yeah.
And I built my stuff. Which, by the way, you don't need any of it. You literally don't need it.
Yeah.
It's all about the actual witch and her power. That's all it is.
That's really the whole experience. And I love that as well, because I feel like even going from Wicca to deciding I love the year and a day. Like that's I've read that as well, like such a perfect, and I feel like, there's no shade on like the community right now, but there's it could be just consumerist culture and social media, but we didn't have that really back then. It wasn't, we had the best we had was MySpace, and that was just into our 20s.
And that was you.
That was me.
That was you.
I did MySpace. I'm late Gen X.
I'm early Gen X.
Yeah. So we were kind of like, we kind of saw the internet developing. But yeah, to go from to Wicca and to sit with it and really absorb that information, that energy, and know that, okay, I love this practice, but it's not necessarily for me. Like, I feel like that is so important in this work, because you have to really it's all about discernment and not following trends or not following what other people. I wonder how things would be different if we did have social media back then.
But the thing is, we did have media, right?
Yeah.
And like Charmed was a big show back in the 90s, right?
Sure.
And they were all about Wicca. Like, what was it? Phoebe's character was always talking about Wicca and Wiccan practices, even though that's really not what they were. But they actually hired a Wiccan for the show to as an expert to do rituals and stuff like that. So they would do it right. Okay. But even a lot of the witch movies back then and shows were really focusing on Wicca. So it was really it wasn't social media, but it was a different type of media that we were seeing that was informing our practices. But for me, it happened a little bit later. I was Wiccan for about 12 years. And then after that, I just started feeling like a lot of things just didn't resonate with me. And also, I am not a rules and structure kind of person. I'm an ebb and flow with whatever I need, follow my intuition kind of person. I don't like that sort of rigid kind of thinking. And I needed to do my own thing. And I was just I'm just doing what feels right to me. Yeah. And I feel like that's what everybody should do, because you can't do what everybody else is doing, because it's not a cookie cutter situation. Spirituality shouldn't ever be that way. And to me, witchcraft is my spirituality. It's not, it is I don't want to say my religion, because it is my spirituality. But I know for some people, they don't necessarily equate it with their spirituality. So it might be different. But regardless, I don't think it should ever be cookie cutter, and you shouldn't be basing your practice on someone else. It's okay to maybe start like I did. Right? I started looking at Wicca, and then I grew from there. And I guess it's just laying that foundation, and you may want to do that, and that might work for you. But I think you then have to reevaluate your life and what feels right. And that's the thing is, right? You have to feel it, right? You have to feel that.
That is important for sure. And it's just being I'm just jumping back, like when you were saying, like I mean, pretty much you were like, I mean, full on solitary. I mean, you were learning on your own. You had no one to really talk to. I'm saying like my experience, like I'm thinking like how different it was. And I always thought that I mean, I am solitary witch, but I did have my fairy grandmother, and she was like very much that guide and she was, you know, she's from Trinidad. She's from Trinidad, and she went to Baptist church. And if you know Baptist church, it goes on forever. It's not a Catholic. I mean, my grandmother was Catholic. My great grandmother was Baptist, and when I would go to Baptist church with her, it's an all day thing. It's not just like you go for an hour in the morning and then you're good and you have your Sunday dinner. No, church was like 4 hours. And I used to just go, and I used to remember just bring books and just sit in the back and wait for her. But and afterwards, that's the whole thing. I would love going to church with her, because after service at around 3 or 4, we would go to the Botanica with a bunch of her friends, and they would get their readings and they would get their tarot readings. And it was just like, for me, it was, I had to grin and bear the long service, but at the end, and the Botanicas back then, we would go to one in particular in Harlem, and I'm sure it doesn't exist anymore, but we would take the train uptown. We were in Brooklyn. We would take the train uptown, and this Botanica was like it was kind of big. It was like medium-sized store. And it was funny because all these like church ladies and sitting in the foyer, and with their hats and everything. And all the kids, because their grandkids or their kids we'll all be playing in the front. And the owner had like little like toys for us and everything, but our toys were like, I was thinking about it, I was like, wait a minute, I'm playing with like Orisha beads and my tarot decks. And that's how we were playing. I remember us playing, we had like playing cards, like regular, like a playing card deck. Yeah. But I was like, well, because they were using it for divination. So we were like literally just playing. And the tarot cards were kids. We used to use it as like, as cards, like a card game. So that's how we would spend the time while they would go. And I remember the curtain, they had this like curtain that would divide the space where I never saw the woman, never saw what she looked like. She would just sit in the back and literally do tarot readings. And they would come out sometimes with little bags or satchels. And I know that or like these sticks, which are of course maybe like sage or mugwort or whatever. So the woman, I guess, would consult them, like, oh, say these prayers and say these songs, but also light this candle or something. So we would always come home and she would have a bag of like a fixed candle or something like that. And that was like our Sunday. So that's what I'm like. So she would kind of guide me. And I remember there was one instance, we were on a train coming home. I think it was the 6th train. I remember the 6th. I remember the number. And I remember I was like, oh, it's 6. I was like, because I was 6. I was 6. So I was saying, oh, it's a 6th train. So random story. But I remember there's this guy that was staring at me, this older man, but like not in like, it was creepy, but it was just like a blank stare. And then my great grandmother told me, you have to protect your third eye. And I was like, what are you talking about? What was it? What do you mean third eye? I have 2 eyes. And then she went to her forehead and she said, when someone is doing that, he's trying to infiltrate your third eye. And I was just like, okay, tell me what you mean. And so she was like on the train, like showing me like, you have to sit still. She showed me like how to center myself and how to ground myself. And pretty much she was like, imagine the lights. You have light and you're throwing your light back at him. Right. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's how I would do it. And she was like, do I do it to everybody? And she was like, no, just when you feel that someone is trying to, and then we would practice like how it feels when someone's like in your auric field. And that's how I was able to, and she would help me with when I was seeing ghosts and things like that in the house. We grew up in Flatbush, in one of those like Victorian style houses. So there were lots of ghosts there, because they still are. They're still running free, rampant and free. But
we'll definitely have an episode about.
We definitely have ghost stories. And we have tons of ghost stories that are still happening and happening at this moment right now. So they're all around this. But it was interesting. Like I had a guide, and even though I couldn't talk about it with friends and things or other family members, my great grandmother, who's really just like this wild woman, she would just do whatever she wanted. And she was a traveler, and she's an artist, and she would just do whatever she pretty much did whatever she wanted. And yeah, I learned from her. And I remember just having, and probably because you don't have to hide it, but I literally had like my first tarot deck, which I still have. And I used to hide it between my mattress, and I used to only be able to read. And I would, weirdo again, Jesus, which is for Jesus, I would read my Bible at night, and then I would pull tarot cards at the same time. Not knowing, in my mind, I was like, oh, this is not blasphemy, because why would Jesus give me these cards, and these cards are helping me? And that's actually how I learned Roman numerals. I was 6 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I started school, and my teachers were like, how do you know Roman numerals? I like knew like, oh, that's like 55. And they were like, what? How did you? I'm like, and then not knowing that, oh, because it's the Rider Waite, and I know the symbols,
Right.
I know what the Roman numerals mean. So it was like, oh, and I couldn't explain to my teachers, oh, these cards with pictures at home that I have at home, where these, this devil is holding these two people. They told me that's six, like that's a 5 and a 1, and like I can't explain that. So
did your great grandmother buy them for you? You said
she did. She bought my first deck, and again, I still have it. That's my one of my main decks. And that deck has traveled with me to England,
that's
all
amazing.
over. And I still have all the cards.
So you were 6 years old when
and I
you bought
still
it?
have all the cards.
Wow.
I have 7. I count them every time. Like I must have lost at least 1 or 2. Not one. I still have all 78. It's like,
wow.
I mean, now they're like old and they're bitten up, and I didn't bite them, but my guinea pig did. And yeah, I mean, they're like weathered, but I still use them. I love them. But this is interesting. We're talking about the different, and I consider myself now like I'm an eclectic witch, which I've dabbled in different scenes, and I've always kind of taken in information from stuff around me. And I dabble a little bit in Ifa, and I know a bit about this, and I know a bit about practicing things, which is my mobile job. I would say I studied anthropology, which is probably what led me to be an anthropologist, because I was so interested in like, I would absorb my grandmother's National Geographic magazines. So we actually have it delivered to the house every week. And she had these like, had them bound in these leather like brown containers, like 6 of them in one. And she had like a whole library, like
because
hundreds.
People used to keep those.
Yeah, and we still have them.
I used to have tons of them too.
I still have them.
Oh,
I still have them.
We had to get rid of them in one of our moves. We had so many.
I was like, I might look at them actually recently, but I would like read through them. And I feel like I was like, this is what prompted me to be like, to study cultural anthropology. So, yeah, it's just always been a big part of who I am. And just being able to like, I guess, come out as a witch has been, and of course, astrology. I mean, astrology is a huge factor for me as well. And, yeah, I mean, I practice that as well now, and that's a big part of my practice. And but I feel like what I was saying, I'm like better than or different than other astrologers, that I want to be that person. But a lot of it is intuitive. I could use the facts, I could use the chart in front of me, but a lot of it is just feeling out the chart and feeling out things. Anyway, we're rambling right now.
No, but that's what we're talking. We're just chatting.
Yeah. So. I mean, yeah, we have a good idea of like our experiences, and
we'll definitely be sharing much more of our personal experiences throughout our episodes, since some of our episodes that we'll do definitely will be related to things we've experienced on a personal nature. Like we have a episode coming up on mediumships, and actually we'll have probably more than one on those.
Yeah.
And since the two of us are natural mediums, we'll definitely be sharing those stories with you. Not only the ghost stories, but like how it affects us personally, how it affected us, and all that stuff. Because I don't think people understand the level of mental and emotional impact that actually has on a person. Especially when you're young and you don't understand what's going on, and where, we live in a culture where all this stuff is fear-based, right? Like, and anything that we don't know in general, in all societies, as soon if you don't know something, you're afraid of it. I don't know why. I mean, it's so easy to just read a book or talk to somebody.
Yeah.
But
it's human nature.
Yeah, exactly. But in general, people are afraid of anything having to do with spirits. Like the average person, obviously, not most witches. And I think it's important to share those stories, along with also talking about mediumship in just out in the field, and communities who are also full of mediums and stuff like that. So yeah. Anyway,
I mean, we'll also, I mean, weekly, monthly intuitive forecasts pretty much, which I'm just using it intuitive because it will contain astrology, but it will also contain Violet and I, like our interpretation of what's happening within the world and what's happening, just for the collective. So we'd be kind of using a mixture of astrology, runes,
Yeah,
tarots.
exactly.
I mean, Violet reads intuitively. I kind of do both. Where I understand these are the cards at the same time. I read whatever comes up. So we'll give you like a well-rounded idea from both of our perspectives, as well as our own psychic downloads. I think this is a big part of who we are. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, not every witch is a medium or a psychic, but not every psychic or medium is a witch, right?
exactly. And not every psychic is a medium, but every medium is a psychic, which is
Yeah,
it's very confusing.
It's a lot, but we exist in all planes, so we'll
Exactly.
be able to give you a rundown of yeah, kind of a well-rounded idea of what's happening.
And then we'll also do some fun things, like we'll talk about some books that we've read or are reading, and maybe share artists or other like witches and stuff that we're really liking on, maybe social media or wherever we find them, and mostly, we'll obviously be focusing on the occult and witchcraft and everything in between.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, excited about this because these are just conversations that Val and I have in general. So
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
just like, we want to like share this with other people because I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we're experienced practitioners, experienced witches. As you can tell, we've had a lot of experience and using the word experience. I used another word. Expertise. I don't know.
Expertise.
But it's important as well to share this with others, especially at this time. I feel like, especially after the pandemic, I feel a lot of people are now open to listening to other maybe like seasoned practitioners. I feel like a lot of people have done some work, and I feel like we're at the level now where people are open to listening or just being aware of what's going on in a deeper space, beyond Google, beyond TikTok, which I love TikTok. Don't get me wrong. I love TikTok, but
Exactly.
yeah, we need to kind of get back to basics.
And we'll also be talking about some like witchcraft basics that I think is something that gets sort of passed over a lot because people want the aesthetic and like jump into spell casting and being like that witch you see in the movie. So, we really definitely will have like episodes like on protection, on grounding, and then we obviously will talk about spell work as well and different kinds of spell works and what you can do in your own practice, easy things and things that are maybe more, involved. And then the other thing I'm really excited about is we're going to have a month of fairies. And they're very excited too. Super excited. They love people talking about them in a good way.
They're the Kardashians of their time. They love it. They love all the attention. Yeah, I'm excited about that. We definitely, and we'll bridge the gap. I mean, fairies are not only like, they're not more than Celtic fairies,
Right, exactly.
like fairies exist in every culture. And again, being, a Black American, Caribbean American woman, you never, but I have a huge connection with fairies. So we'll talk about all of that because it's important, fairy, and the lore, with the fae and the lore. But yeah, I feel like,
I'm very excited. This is our somewhat first official episode, right? I guess you can call this as our official first episode. It's about us and what we'll be doing, but I'm super excited to go on this journey. And I hope you are too. So thank you for joining us. And remember, you are magic and life is weird.
I love that. And we are weird. We're
totally weird.
If you like this podcast, please remember to rate us and leave a review. We love to see your comments. We would love to see your comments, and 5 stars are nice.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
On whatever streaming service you're listening on, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or whichever other one you're listening on, so more people can enjoy it. The higher the rating, the more people will see it.
Yes, which is the goal.
Exactly.
So
We appreciate you
very
very
much.
much. This is the Witch's Tea
With Malorine from Moonlight Divination.
and Violet the Green Witch.
Thank you. Have a great week.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.